we have to be very grateful for a town that really, I think, fosters localism. It needed to be more exciting than sitting in your pajamas one day ordering on the internet for your toys. My addiction was work. I think I was a workaholic. We are capable of building supercomputers, of sending people to the moon, of immense technological feats, but we are not good about talking about hard topics. Underneath that isn't so much just it's phobia or fear about death. It's fear of grief. Because 80% of people want to die at home, but only 30% do. Do they want to go to Irish wake? You know what I mean? I know that's where I'm leaning. Predominant regrets of the dying is one, they spent too much time at work. Two, they lived too much according to the dictates of that culture. We die whenever fear governs our choices.
Okay.
We die when we sacrifice growth for security. And we die whenever we choose a convenient certainty over an inconvenient mystery. I rarely trust anyone that says I don't have any regrets. For me, that's a conversation stopper.
Welcome to another edition of No Holds Barred. I'm Rich Roth, and my guest today, Danny Givens. Hi, Danny.
Hey, pleasure.
How are you?
Good. Yeah, today I'm good, yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Danny, of course, owner of Givens Books and Little Dickens. And we're going to talk a lot about that, but we're also going to talk about, I don't want to call it a hobby of yours, but you do a lot of volunteer work as a death doula. And, we're going to get into that and what that is. And, and it was really kind of a wild scene for me, because as I explained to you when we were kind of talking on the phone, I'm watching a show on HBO called The Pit. And all of a sudden I see this thing that's a death doula, and I'm thinking to myself, what the heck is a death doula?
Yeah.
And then I'm searching you, in Givens Books, and you guys are celebrating your 50th anniversary and really successful business and, really an iconic business here in the Lynchburg area. So I was kind of looking that up, and then I stumble across this death doula thing right after I'd first been exposed to it. And I'm like, holy cow, so I'm excited to talk to you about all of it.
Great. Yeah. Death on one side and play on the other, and reading. All right. Well, I hope it's meaningful.
And you've actually combined the two with, correct me if I get this wrong, but a death cafe?
Yeah, those are conversations or meetings we have once a month at the store now with groups of the final Monday of each month. We started those about 4 months ago.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely talk about all that, but let's talk about what kind of got you started. As I've heard you describe that you were kind of a nomad traveling around the country as a kid with your parents, originally born in New York. What part of New York?
Upstate, Cortland.
Cortland, okay.
Yeah, back in 1960, yep. And then my parents quickly moved a few years after to Tucson, Arizona. And that's where I spent kind of early formative years of my life, from 3 or 4 up to my teenage years before we, moved to Virginia.
And then you talked about piling into a camper with your family and just traveling around and what did you say, 45 states before you were like 10 years old or something?
Yeah. And I don't want to talk too much about myself with that, but it's I guess it did lead up to kind of serendipitously, I guess, the bookstore too, but and the toy store. But so my father just is a insatiably curious man, and my mom very adventuresome. Every summer we spent 6 weeks, traveling around the country. Yeah. So by the time I was, 13 or 14, I'd been to probably most of the states, probably 45 of them. But we'd just travel around and, KOA campgrounds, $10 a night, bologna sandwiches and Shasta root beers. And
what was that like as a kid? I know a lot of times kids hate being in the car for long periods of time.
Yeah.
And maybe you didn't appreciate all the cool things that you wound up seeing until later in life.
Yeah, it was an overhead camper. So I did like up above, and looking out at the scenery across, all the, at different areas we were, traveling, state parks and museums and battlegrounds out east. My father was a history teacher, so, he was just really determined to expose us to all these history lessons, and then sometimes read poetry at night, around the campfire. Robert Service, Cremation of Sam McGee. But what I didn't know until later was that when we made a trip through Virginia in 1969, when the flood Camille had just hit, and I remember going downtown because my 9-year-old eyes, I remember seeing the water barely just receding. But later the story came about that my father was kind of secretly looking for a place to open up a bookstore, so moved from Tucson.
So all these travels,
many of them,
they had multiple reasons, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just to find a place.
Right. And his childhood dream was to open up a bookstore. So Lynchburg, as I recall, didn't have a bookstore at the time. It had Rules Bookshop, kind of card shop, had a small area in the back, but like Charlottesville had maybe 10 or 12, 15 bookstores. Lynchburg, none officially. And so I think that seed was planted in his head. And then 4 years later, he just packed everything up. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, he just bought a used moving van, and we packed everything in, including 8,000 books, and the washer and dryer barely fit. But I mean, if they hadn't, the books would have gone first. And I'm talking a caravan, so 3 or 4 vehicles, and there were older kids that were driving, and my mom drove one, my father and my older sibling another, and moved without a job.
Wow.
And we lived at the Bedford campground, the Bedford Lake, which now is, no, I don't even know if it's there. I know it's there, but not sure if the campground, I don't think the campground is. Maybe it is. And then lived there for 6 weeks until they found a job at EC Glass. And then that was in 73. And, a bit of a cultural adjustment, from Tucson all those years. And then 3 years later, we bought what now is Lynchburg Pilates on Boonesboro Road, right next to Boonesboro Animal Hospital. So where that animal hospital was, there was an old house. And where Pilates is, it was an old 1930s abandoned gas station. And so we gutted that and then drywalled it inside. Me and my father, I was probably 15 or 16 at the time. And then he went out and started buying used books, for 50 cents or so, and sold them for $1.50. This was back in 1976, called it Booneshire Books. So there'll be some listeners who remember this. They're now in their probably 60s or, older, 50s or 60s easily. And when they came in, when they were younger. And it took off, and we ended up expanding twice there at that location, which is why you can see the further addition behind Pilates. That was a 2-story building. And then in 79, 3 years later, we outgrew that and bought a place on Lakeside Drive where we were 20 years ago, and put a house underneath that. At that point, I was going to college, and renamed it Givens Books.
Wait a second. You had a house underneath?
Yeah. So the basement of the store, so to speak, kind of lived in the basement. And I think he knew that was temporary too, but until he bought a house, because eventually the books moved downstairs. And those are the days when some of our listeners will remember that he put coffins and skulls, and because he did archaeological digs in Mexico and brought back, skulls of that were dated back to 1100. And, he was just an antique collector. And
could you appreciate all that your dad was exposing you to at a young age, or did it really kind of settle in a little bit later on in life? Because, all that educational stuff in the summer, in the, the museums and the different historical sites and battlegrounds, I can imagine a lot of kids are like, man, I want to do something fun. I want to go to an amusement park or whatever. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that was, like any normal kid, it's like, okay, we're on the road again. When are we going to stop? And then, campgrounds and playgrounds and things were obviously a highlight, but it wasn't until later, I think, that I appreciated his driving, determination to expose us to, just a lot of history at a young age, and travel. I mean, travel is always good, just to see other places. And, but I was young, I was from a young age, but I was 12, 13 when some of those trips ended. As a result, I don't care much for camping now. I think a lot of it too was just probably the cheap materials we use, you know what I mean? Cheap sleeping bags and things like that, because he didn't have a lot of money.
Right.
So, but anyhow, that's how the store started. And 79 moved it. And then 10 years later, I had been teaching English and Spanish at Jefferson Forest, and then started Little Dickens.
So you move here at the age of 15. Your dad gets a job at EC Glass, opens the bookstore. You were 15 at the time, about
13 when we moved here, but 16 when he opened it, 1976.
Okay, so there was a couple year gap there. Moving as a teenager is never easy. Leaving friends, all that.
Yeah.
Did you adjust okay?
Yeah, we were always nomadic because he got bored of a place and wanted to move. We weren't rooted very long in any one place, so that was, I think, a little bit hard. I did learn to make friends easily, so I adjust to things, I think, in that sense. My wife tells me that I'm flexible and I, adjust to change and I'm pretty spontaneous, but I'm sure there are other, negative effects of that too. I wasn't rooted, didn't have friends for long periods of time. So it was hard making friends long-term,
So you've obviously been a lot of places and seen a lot of places, moved around quite a bit, as you pointed out. You've set up roots in Lynchburg. You talked about your dad wanting to be here in part because there really weren't any other bookstores here. What else about Lynchburg attracted your family? And for you, I mean, you've seen a lot of places. You've stuck around 50 years for Givens Books.
That's a good point. And it's a great place. I think the history, he was a American history teacher. So a lot of the Civil War, a lot of the Revolutionary War, and so that appealed to him. I think too, coming from the desert, we were tired finally of the desert and just, it was lush and green and the rainfall and you could have gardens. And I remember driving down Rivermont Avenue and almost feeling at the time, because if you've been out here in Arizona long enough and then you come to, Virginia, especially when you come into the airport, it's like the Amazon, and driving down Rivermont, I remember feeling almost claustrophobic, as though we were going down a tunnel because the trees would almost encompass you, what I mean? Because in Arizona, you can see for 20 miles away and it's all desert. There aren't so many trees, just cactus. So
you're in school. You get your degree, you become a teacher, kind of following your dad's footsteps. What did you say? Spanish and English over at JF. And then you get cut back a little bit as far as your hours,
Yeah, that's the real serendipitous moment. So I'm teaching there through 3 or 4 years. And then they ask me, they bring me into the office and say, we're introducing German. And so that's going to cut back the enrollment. So think of a teacher's salary. And then the principal's suddenly offering half salary. Plus benefits, so the health benefits. But I've already been thinking, I think I maybe want to start a business. But I traveled to a toy store in Chapel Hill. My brother was doing his PhD there at Chapel Hill, and I visited several times a toy store. I just was enchanted by it. And I remember buying toys there for my kids, and then things for myself. I always had a playful nature, and still like to buy toys. And just thinking, wow, there's something appealing about that. So this was kind of the kick in the pants. Because he said, you have a choice, you got a few weeks to think about it, but it's either, quit or half time. And I thought that was my chance to keep the benefits, right? Health benefits, and then go for it. And back then there was an internet, you know what I mean? So I had to do research at the library really fast and then work up a loan for the bank, business plans. So, yeah.
Tell me about the toy store in Chapel Hill. I mean, what was it about? Because there are toy stores all over the place, but that one obviously had a pretty profound impact. Is it still there?
Good question. It's a good question because it's been years since I've been back to Chapel Hill area too. It was, I think there's something magical about it. And I recall it being small and just seeing toys that I couldn't find at big chains. And so that was part of it. And so that's something that I think I wanted to mimic when I started it. And I knew. Any
particular type of toys? I mean, was it more kind of educational?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Educational, a little more, some of them made in Europe, Playmobil, which is a German toy, and then Aerobies. And yeah, so, and I'd been to larger chain stores, where you get a lot of plastic, and these were just more unique, and it was specialty toy stores, they call them. And so I just think that stuck in my head. And then.
Do you think that had anything, looking for something, specific, different, unique as far as those types of toys? Because I'm thinking back to your dad wanted to be in a place where there were no bookstores, right? And you could kind of, I don't want to say be the only game in town, but, be doing something different than everybody else. Was that part of it?
Yeah, and there's no toy store either.
Mm-hmm.
Toys R Us wasn't around. So maybe you went to Kmart, you know what I mean? So I did research that. And then I researched also teacher stores were just in their infancy. I mean, literally infancy. So I thought, well, let me combine that with, teacher supplies, which was just beginning to take off. I mean, huge. And so when I opened up this little store, and it was only 800 square feet, I mean, the size of a couple of living rooms, and then it just took off like fire, and then I expanded twice there. Ended up being probably in the end 4,000 square feet from that 800, and it was right next to the bookstore.
Right.
So all these things combine to make it very lucky. That's why I really look cautiously on this whole thing of success. It's not. I mean, sure, it was some hard work, but it was serendipitous. It was timing. It was luck. I was fortunate enough to have my father's store right next to it because the two go really well.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible employees, a gutsy father and mother who, decided to take a chance. I mean, they had very little money and put all their life savings into that store. I remember the cash register he made out of cupcake tins for the change. Didn't want to spend a couple $100 in a register. And so, I mean, just, very brave parents. Sister that's helped me along the way too, a wonderful sister, Sarah, who's been there, from the start. And she's brilliant at what she does. So, I mean, I don't want to take too much credit. You know what I mean? I was gutsy to start, but all these other factors are very important. And
well, I mean, that's often the way, right? In life in general. I mean, they, one of the sayings, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's kind of like the harder you work, the luckier you get type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, it's kind of like, when you put in the work and you do things the right way, things tend to work out a little bit better.
Yeah.
How'd you come up with the name Little Dickens?
It was kind of a play on words for a couple of reasons. Number one, when, with children, when they're being a little naughty, back in the day, it was like, you little Dickens, you. Plus it had that, was it Dickensian, just a Charles Dickens kind of literary feel to it and kind of a playful. Yeah, we threw over, rolled around probably 20 or 30 names for several weeks.
Were there any that came close?
I can't even recall now. I just know once Little Dickens there, it was like, that's it.
The one?
Yeah, that's the one.
So you open that, you're right next to Givens Books.
Yeah.
You keep expanding. You go from 800 square feet to 4,000.
Yeah.
And then what was it? 1999, your dad decides, hey, look, I'm done.
Yeah.
You buy Givens Books from him. You combine the two stores.
Yeah. The city was supposed to do a cloverleaf at that point, at that location. And I wrote the state and said, hey, if you're going to do a cloverleaf, I got word it was. So I wrote a letter to them and said, hey, if you're going to do a cloverleaf, better to buy us out now. And rather than 10 years down the road, it'll be more affordable. And they wrote back and said, great. And those are the days when there was, we were big in the black, as a state. And so they offered, an amount of money and my dad took some for the store and he generously offered me some for the Little Dickens and then bought land down the road, just a half mile down the road, less than that. And then he was at the retirement age. And so he retired in 99. So I bought him the inventory and the name, and then built this one large facility of 16,000 square feet. And that's very lucky too, because I mean, that's been a huge boon. I mean, to own the property and the building is tremendous when it comes to retail, to own the property rather than to rent it.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Tell me about the vision though. When you build this huge building, you combine both things together. Now you're opening a cafe.
I mean, Picasso, all good artists theft. Okay. So I get in a car with my son at the time and we travel around the East Coast for literally 2 weeks, just taking pictures of all the coolest bookstores and toy stores. I'm like, oh, I like that. I'm going to steal that. Oh, I like this, this little room. And so to some extent it was that, and came back with a notebook and pictures of all these things, not with an iPhone, right? But with a camera.
Old school.
And then I was lucky enough, to find a guy named Paul Kitchen, who is British and very, oh my gosh, he was amazing, just daring, avant-garde, just an amazing artist. And he, I found him last minute. And so we brainstormed. And so I paid him basically to kind of design this thing. That design in the front is from I want to say a 19th century Swedish tent or circus tent or something. And he had some other crazy ideas, which I won't talk about, but he wanted it. It was, so the brick inside, some of that is from the Academy, by the way. The very entryway is from the Academy that was burned down downtown and with the storm. And I was down there myself picking through a lot of the brick. I was supposed to do many thousand, but I ran out of energy. So we just did the vestibule as you walk in. But yeah, so that's another part of it is, just I'm lucky enough to encounter the right people at the right time.
And, again, back to the vision, though. I mean, it was a bookstore and you had a toy store, but you made it this, dare I say, this kind of magical place. I've seen and heard the term wonderland described. I mean, it's so much more than just a bookstore and a toy store. I mean,
yeah, no, those are really good questions.
But that vision, tell me about it.
Well, I think, that's when internet was just starting to explode at the time. And I knew that if I didn't do something that was going to emotionally grab the people coming through the door, I didn't want it to just be a building filled with books and toys. I wanted it like that wow effect.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped that I was taking some of these ideas. I mean, literally went to Knoxville, there's a toy store there that I, some of their elements I incorporated. And then this artist helped me, with other things, with this, 6-foot large clock. And then I started just looking for ideas through books and things. So I just knew that there was an emotional component of shopping that I wanted to really take advantage of, that it's not just product you want, but you want kind of that whole package, that whole experience of good customer service, but also what's the ambiance like? Mm-hmm. What do you feel when you walk into a store? And I had walked into enough stores too, like that toy store in Chapel Hill, where I thought, ooh, I feel a little different, So, and I just tried to take that all the way, from the flooring to the cafe to the artwork, but again, this was help with this artist along the way, this massive 12-foot Chinese kite, and then the flying pterodactyls,
Mm-hmm.
I had that idea because I'd visited, I'd been to a couple of toy conventions. So yeah, I think it's just your mind open to lots of creative ideas. But like I say, I think a lot of it's just theft. You know what I mean? I just had an open mind and I was curious. So I took an idea and maybe turned it and twisted it and then had my artist help me. And then he was a huge help. I mean, just all those things. But I knew it needed to be more exciting than sitting in your pajamas one day ordering on the internet for your toys. I didn't, that can be pretty boring. I wanted it to be something that grabbed you.
Well, and I'm going to ask this question before the next one, because all the different ideas that you came up with, and this may not be a fair question to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you have one favorite part of the store, one of the most unique things, or one of the ideas that it's the one for you?
Yeah, I mean, probably the mural in the back there. Cafe wall's pretty nice. That Birdie, one of our employees, just finished. That's beautiful. And then around the corner is, dare say this, but I'll call it kind of the suicide room. But there's it's several people in history, mostly nonfiction, right? Walt Whitman and Socrates, Hemingway. And so it's fun to see who picks out who's who and how they met their end. You know what I mean? So Hemingway, I think, shot himself, in Idaho toward the end of his life. Of course, Socrates, drinking the hemlock. But it's a beautiful mural. It's been there ever since the beginning. Yeah, it's where people like to sit back in the cafe too. But yeah, that's probably.
So that is kind of a special place in your heart.
Probably.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. So books, though. I mean, I've got to imagine you're a huge reader. Are there?
I am for sure. And
is it biographies? Is it nonfiction? Is it fiction? Is it
history? Probably 80%
romance novels. Maybe?
Yeah, no, probably 80% nonfiction, psychology, a little bit of light philosophy, history. My father was a huge reader. My wife's a huge reader. My kids are. So yeah, I think what I'm just curious. I think that's probably the one adjective that describes me best, is I'm just curious. I want to know about things and so if I have a topic, I want to read about it and know about it. Sometimes it might be biography, but I'd like to know how people tick, a lot of it. So a lot of Carl Jung, with the subconscious and psychology. But yeah, I'm just grateful to parents who read a lot. And I mean, their books were always coming with us. So imagine moving every 3 years and 8,000 to 10,000 books came with us. So I got tired of moving books after a while. Yeah.
Are you surprised, because you just referenced it a second ago, people sitting on their computers at home in their PJs, ordering books, ordering toys, whatever the case might be. Are you surprised, and I'm going to use a word that you used before, and we'll talk more about this in a second, but are you surprised at the success that, Givens Books and Little Dickens still has to this day?
To some extent, yes, but we have to be very grateful for a town that really, I think, fosters localism.
Embraces it.
Yeah. Like I think in larger cities, it's a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when you come to a place like Lynchburg, 80, 90,000 people, 150 surrounding, with
Right.
Bedford, I think they feel a great sense of pride and ownership with really well-run local businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a major factor. So yeah, I mean, those 2 or 3 factors, one would be obviously to provide them with really an abundance, an experience.
It's an experience.
Yeah, to come in, they love meeting there. They love talking there. There's business meetings. They meet with their friends so they can have coffee and a sandwich there at Troublemaker, but they can also, then pick a gift for a person. And I think they love the service with, because all our staff reads, so they love to get personal recommendations. So believe it or not, though, American Bookseller Association, I think 15 years ago, there was a turning point, and there's actually several hundred more bookstores now than there were 25 years ago.
Really?
They're different in nature. They're smaller, so they don't necessarily support the whole family. You know what I mean? But yeah, and despite Amazon's strength, we're surviving. I mean, we had a great year last year, and sales continue to grow.
And the other really fascinating thing about it, about books in particular, because I looked into this and I studied it when, I guess just a handful of years ago, we bought Home Magazine.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, a magazine, right?
Yeah,
it's like books. And, we were talking to the different consultants that were working with us on the project. And, one of the things that stuck with me to this day was them saying, do you remember when Nooks and Kindles came out? And that was going to be the end of books.
Yeah. And those waned, by the way. I mean, they're still here.
Right.
But yeah, I've looked at the percentages and they've definitely reduced.
And the rationale is people still love to hold it in their hands.
Very tactile.
But what else? What else do you notice about that? Why are, with all the technology we've got, and iPhones and iPads and Nooks and Kindles, and why do people still like to hold a book in their hand? Why do they still like to go to your bookstore or any bookstore?
Yeah. Wow, that's a really good question. That requires, I maybe have a couple theories on that, but I think there's something, I think we're moving toward smaller and toward, community. I think people might be tiring of, large, efficient, fast, hurry, productive, to this maybe connecting with people.
Yeah, I was going to say more personalized.
Connecting, with community. I mean, I feel that. I mean, I think there's been this last year, I can tell you, there's been kind of a turnoff to, people like, Musk and Bezos that, are billionaires, and, especially when they advertise their $50 million weddings, in Venice. And I think people got turned off to that, and I think we're moving toward analog in some ways. I don't want you to misinterpret that, but I think, and plus just the drawbacks that come with screen time. I think we're seeing that definitely with children. Jonathan Haidt has written a book called, I think, Anxious Generation. And I think that's the name of it. And he's single-handedly responsible now for, I think, in probably 12 or 13 schools, passing legislation that eliminates phones in schools. So he talks about that, just the drawbacks of screen, of social media. So I think that's coming around too. I think it's going to be a few more years where we look back to think, wow, we were really bewitched by these things. I mean, literally, you know what I mean?
And now with what we're seeing with AI, right? And as quickly as that's moving, I think, on one hand, people are excited about what it offers, but on the other hand, I think people are scared. And, I'm a big believer in the pendulum, right? And sometimes it swings too far and it winds up coming back. And, and when you talk about the Nooks and the Kindles and why people are still wanting to hold books and magazines and all that in their hand. They don't want to move too fast into the future and get away from the humanization and the personalization that you were just talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really that pendulum swing, I think, is slowly moving back. It might take a few more years, but I'm hopeful that that's what we're going to see. My daughter believes that. I have a daughter who's going to come into the business this year, by the way, too, and 50 years since kind of the third generation. So
that's got to be exciting for you.
Yeah. Oh, I'm beyond thrilled. Thrilled. Yeah. Yep. And she's super sharp. She's on the ball. She's got more organizational skills than I do. And she'll be able to take this to newer heights, I'm sure. Yep. I'm very excited about that. But yeah, that's a whole other topic. But I'm very hopeful that things will change when it comes to this whole obsession with technology and speed and efficiency and productivity and all that. And before it leaves me, I wanted to just touch on this whole thing of success, because I really don't like that word much. And it's the last thing I want on my tombstone, that, because I just think, I don't like the way our culture kind of defines that. So
I was going to say, it depends how you define it.
Right. And I don't like it to be defined as, someone, who's maybe helped build this, this business in this sense that the community sees as, successful. I mean, I know that's the perception, and that might be the truth in one sense, but it also has come at great cost. You know what I mean?
You talked about once that there was a dark side to owning a business.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you become obsessed, and I tend to be obsessive with things, you know what I mean? I think there are things that were put on the chopping block for that. I mean, I think, time away from my family. I think my addiction was work. I think I was a workaholic. I think to some extent I'm still working on that, and that fixation on, making something the best, like the best store or the best place. And I think, I don't know how healthy that is. I mean, I'm extremely grateful to a community that has helped bring this about, because it's been the collective efforts of so many people, a sister and parents and timing and this community, you know what I mean? So I don't mean to, denigrate that, but it's also, it's come with some downside,
But when you talk about success, and again, how you define it, right? I mean, of course, some people will define it by, the things that they have, right? The money that they have.
Right.
But when you look at, what you and your family and everyone else has built along with you at Givens, and you look at the fact that that's sort of become an iconic institution here in Lynchburg, in the sense that generations of people have gone through there and spent countless hours with their kids, and that family time and what that's meant to them. That can be another way to define success, can it?
Yeah. I mean, so this is a, delicate topic, but I mean, yes and no. So that's not what I want to be remembered for, though. I mean, I think that tickles tickles the ego a little bit, but honest to goodness, it's I don't want to lose sight of the far more important things, which is why I got into the Death Doula work. It's just, is relationships, and I've made mistakes there too. And so I think I just don't know of many happy people that are overly ambitious when it comes to business.
Well, but, and again, getting back to the success, and you talk about the important things like relationships.
Yeah.
When you think about providing a space for mothers and fathers to bring their kids and spend time together and learn and read and all those different things.
Rich,
that's amazing.
I appreciate the pushback.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, I think that's pretty incredible.
No, that's nice. That's nice. No, it is. And I'm grateful for that. And I really am happy that it's kind of a refuge, for people to be able to feel free to talk about anything there. Cause that's the other thing that I really love about what we've helped to create there. But yeah, I'm just saying, anytime, that you become obsessed with something, just beware that there's going to be sacrifices in other areas. You know what I mean? And I think this newer generation coming up, I can see my kids already doing a better job with that. Like when I have 5 kids, when I see them get this work-life balance thing better than I do. And
I was just thinking that phrase.
Yeah. And that's one thing. That's one of my regrets there is I probably didn't do that really well. I was so obsessed and so workaholic. And I mean, I worked long hours. I made it home to read to my kids and tuck them in. And, there's things that I did right, but I also look back and think, I could have probably spent a little more time, and then with friends and family too. Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the bookstore, but your other, what word do you want to use? It's not a hobby. It's
probably just another interest.
Okay.
Yeah. Another interest.
But it's more than an interest. I mean, you're certified, you're volunteering on a regular basis, and we're talking about Death Doula here.
Yeah.
And, as I pointed out, it's only been a couple weeks since I've first heard that term. And then I'm coming across you being one, and I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I got to learn more about this. How did this happen? You go from having this great bookstore, kids' toy store, wonderland type of place, and, now you're working with people as they're dying. How does that happen?
Well, I've always kind of had an interest, this is a little bit in, not always, but kind of death in that process. But a brother of mine, a younger brother, 3 or 4 years ago, he was in a job that connected him with hospice work. And then he emailed me and sent this out. And then that's where it kind of like, whoa, what? Because I was familiar with doula work, birth doulas,
right.
Midwives. And then I looked it up and thought, this is, yeah. So there's just something, how do I say? I hate to use the word spiritual, but yeah, in a sense, spiritual, transcendent. But, my motives aren't entirely altruistic in the sense that, yes, I had the desire to kind of be with people, especially maybe those who are struggling in those final months, of dying. But I knew that it would put me in touch with, that mindset of things that really matter, And so again, it was kind of curiosity, like what do people think in their final months? And what is that like? And how can I help them navigate that? Because it's kind of a holistic approach. You're trying to, psychologically and emotionally and spiritually kind of help them through that, in a non-medical way, whether it's preparing for that or whether it's helping them heal certain past or help them, let's say, with broken relationships, or just it's mostly being a good listener and befriending them genuinely and helping them, maybe advocating for them in their final wishes and moments in death, like what type of funeral they want, or what type of vigil, or legacy work sometimes, like what do they want to be remembered for? Because some people don't talk about those things. What fascinates me is that this intrigues me to no end, is that we are capable of building supercomputers, of sending people to the moon, of immense technological feats, but we are not good about talking about hard topics. I mean, you think about that and think about how much suffering and how much anguish could be reduced if we were just capable of evolving emotionally to be able to talk about hard things. And so I think this phobia about death in our culture, which is, I think, stronger in some cultures than others, and it's strong here, I think, in the United States.
As far as the phobia? As
far as the phobia goes, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've lived in Japan. I've lived in South America, visited other cultures as well. And I think there's, it's a strong phobia here. And I think underneath that isn't so much just it's phobia or fear about death. It's fear of grief. And so I think we live in I say this, kind of a Disneyland mentality where we love happy films and we want to be happy and we don't want to talk about sad things. We don't want to talk about grief or loss. And I think we miss out when we avoid that. And I think talking about hard things is like anything.
Well, the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Easier you get at it. But I mean, think about it. So we evolve psychologically, right? Physically, we all grow up to be adults. Socially, some of us might be a little awkward, but but the last thing to catch up is the emotional part. And that's another thing with that I think that is really important for business is emphasizing more the EQ rather than the IQ. And I think that always lags behind. When you think of spouses or partners, how easy do they how easy time do they have talking about sex or money or apologizing to each other or owning their mistakes?
I never get apologies.
Yeah.
No, seriously.
I mean, really. So talking about hard things, and I think grief is the other side of joy. And I think if we're able to feel grief and walk through that, I think it also enables us to feel joy deeper.
As a society, do you feel like I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It's not belief, but our perception of death and dying, the way we handle it, is it changing? Or is it just because I'm getting older and closer to, that reality where I'm sitting there going, okay, things are slowing down, things are breaking down, this isn't going to last forever. And, even like having conversations with my dad, who's now in his 80s, it's just become more of a reality. And I'm wondering, is that a societal thing or an age thing, in your opinion?
So I'm trying to understand the question. So you're wondering if it's changing much. This
right, like we're more accepting of it and willing to talk about it, and I think so. And it's becoming more of a reality. And I'm wondering if it's a societal thing or just because we're getting closer to.
I gotcha. Yeah. Excellent question. Don't know if I know the answer to that, but I think, for example, with this whole death doula work, and I mean, this is something that started only 20 years ago in England, and hospice was only introduced to Central Virginia in the 1980s, because 80% of people want to die at home, but only 30% do. So that gap means that there's, I think last minute, there's some fear maybe, and they just want to hang on or be in a safe place like a hospital, even though it's sterile. But I would say it's changing. I would say, and it's been in other cultures. You can go to other cultures where, I mean, look at Mexico, Dia de los Muertos. They embraced it. But I think in our country it is slowly changing.
Well, and one of the things that I'll point to is, instead of funerals now, we're seeing celebrations of life. And I think it's becoming more of a party and a joyful remembrance rather than a sad, somber, everybody gets dressed up in black. And,
Good point. Yeah.
Are you seeing more of that?
A little bit. And I'm seeing also people being more expressive of what exactly they want as they come to the end of their life. Like, do they want a funeral in a church? No, you know what I mean? Or do they want to go to Irish wake? You know what I mean? I mean, I know that's where I'm leaning.
Pass the bottle, right?
I want some fun stories and some good drinks. So I think that's coming to the surface more as a culture. I think, and I think that's gaining momentum as well. And that's kind of part of this work. Is like, hey, what do you want? Because I mean, if you think of it, the 5 regrets, the 5 predominant regrets of the dying is 1, they spent too much time at work. 2, they lived too much according to the dictates of that culture. It could have been that subculture they lived in, could have been family expectations, could have been a church culture.
Like trying to please other people.
Other people. I mean, this is, and others, they didn't learn to readily express their emotions and feelings. They kept them in. Another is they lost touch with. The 4th is they lost touch with family and friends when they should have stayed in touch. And the last is they didn't allow themselves to be fully happy.
Are most of the people that you're encountering and you're working with as a death doula, of those 5, are most of them, do they have at least one? Is it more than one? Is it all 5? It's not like the 5 stages, right? Where they go through all of these.
No, not at all. I think, and sometimes those conversations people don't want to have, you know what I mean? I'm there to listen and kind of help. But with one instance, for example, there was a gentleman who had kind of a severed relationship with a child. And so, it was a matter of trying to repair that in time, so. But I would think it usually comes down to relationships, whether that's feelings. Too much time at work is not enough time with family. Not learning to express your feelings was like, wow, why did I wait so long to really embrace those emotions and express love and affection to people around me? And then the same thing. I mean, all those are connected, I think, with relationships. But I think generally those regrets deal with, like, why didn't I apologize sooner? Why did I think I was going to live on and on? I mean, I think that's part of, I think, when the Stoics talk about wearing death on your shoulder is it really helps you just live more richly. It's not a morbid thought of like, oh, I think about death. It's
What do you mean wearing death on your shoulders?
Was that Cicero, I think? I think what it does is it reminds you of the brevity of life and how important it is to savor this meal like you may not have it forever.
So when you say wearing death on your shoulder, being aware that it's always...
it's ever present. It's ever present.
And it could happen at any time.
Yeah. I mean, if you're 30 or 40, I got another, life expectancy is 80. I got another 30 or 40. And then,
Here
who
comes
knows?
a bus.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, I think for me, it makes me hug my wife longer. It makes me savor my meals more. Not to saying that I do that all the time, but I think if I'm aware of that, I don't want to delay that apology, or I don't want to delay that ownership of that mistake that I made, or, that when I ruptured a relationship, so that I think that's what it means. That's part of Stoicism, I think.
The gentleman that you just talked about that had the severed relationship, did that wind up working out?
It did, luckily, and just a beautiful moment, you know what I mean, where he was able to compose a letter, and I kind of helped him with that. And then, and there was a response to that. I don't want to share too much about that, but it was, that's kind of another gentleman I remember who just loved poetry, and he was in insurance work, but he just loved poetry. And when I came to know him, we just read poetry together. It was a short time, unfortunately. They called me in late to that case, but I remember he wanted me to read poetry. And I remember reading some poems to him and looking up, he was just weeping, I think they get close to something that we don't know, and that's not necessarily a religious thing I'm talking about. I think it's just something transcendent that when you get that close to going to whatever is beyond, I think they feel things that we don't. And I feel really honored to be a part of that, I think,
What have you noticed as far as, you talk about that different, and I don't know how to put this into words exactly, but you said it wasn't necessarily a religious thing, but, people talk about, seeing the light and, different kind of, again, not really finding the word, but as you get closer to that moment, different realizations maybe that you have. What have you noticed as far as what you've noticed as far as people coming to?
Yeah, and I think it's very situational. I don't think it happens to everyone. I've read some stuff on this. I'm not so sure if it's maybe what I've read is that on extreme ends we have uber religious, and then the other side of anti. You know what I mean? There's kind of a connection with fears on both sides. Whereas when you have moderation in between, you know what I mean, where your mind is open to, how do I say this? There tends to be less fear. So I think, and I've encountered both.
The people who were uber religious.
This is just things that I've read now. So
okay.
I don't want to get too controversial here, but I mean,
well, no, that's okay.
That they're just as susceptible, and depending what you want to define as uber religious, I'm talking, that there can be just as many fears on that side. You know what I mean?
Well, and I guess, one of the questions that I would have is, for people who may not be very religious,
right?
Maybe even for people who don't believe, there's that phenomenon, at least, in Christianity, right? Where, if you accept him as your Lord and Savior, you'll go to heaven.
Right.
So it's like, maybe you didn't believe your whole life, but all of a sudden you're like, I'm getting to the end, and do you see that change in people?
No, I haven't really.
You haven't?
No. I mean, and the one gentleman I'm referring to too, who was, who loved poetry, he was kind of a-religious. It wasn't, I don't think he was. And it was beautiful. I mean, the peace that he felt or seemed to, and just he wanted to just be encompassed by all these great thinkers, you know what I mean, that had given him so much pleasure and satisfaction while he was living, and wanted me to read this poetry to him, in his final days. It was really quite beautiful, So
have you noticed that people who are more religious and feel like they are going to a better place are more comfortable with the process as
I
they get closer?
I haven't
noticed
no,
that?
I haven't
Okay.
noticed that. Yeah, yeah. And it's hard to speculate on that, but I've my own personal thoughts on that. But yeah,
Well, I mean, I'm just asking
yeah.
because you've obviously been with a lot of people who are going through the
Not
process.
as many as I hope to be. So like, I'm kind of in the
Okay.
first couple of years of this, So yeah.
Tell me how it started in terms of, I mean, you talked about how, where your interests developed, but, going about being a death doula. Well, first explain what exactly is a death doula?
Well, so just think of a midwife, I guess, right? With birth, think of it as a midwife, maybe with death, where you're, in one sense, you're ushering in life, and in the other, you're ushering kind of out in a sense. But you're kind of advocating for them, getting to know them the first few visits, getting to know them, what's going on, probably the biggest part of it is just deep listening and acquiring trust, establishing trust, and then to find out, hey, what are your hopes? If they feel comfortable with that conversation. A lot of it is just, reading very carefully, where they are.
Mm.
And then, what are your wishes and what do you want your family to do? And and a lot of it is early preparation. If it's early enough, it's, what do you want the funeral to be like? And are other things in order, with the will or other
So you're
things?
helping with all that potentially.
Potentially. Yeah. Yeah. So early enough, you get to, help with that preparation. But, yeah, and it's kind of holistic approach, just finding out their wishes. In this case, the man, for example, when finally there was some trust established, it was some of maybe what his regrets were or what things he was worried about. So you find out, what's heavy on their heart, for example. And and this is not anything with medical or counseling at all. This is very different. This is just helping them sometimes navigate with their family some of their wishes as they, as they get closer to death. If there are big concerns and worries, then that's something where I pass on to, to counselors that are more professional and equipped to handle, more anxiety.
So you said your brother was talking to you about hospice that got your wheels turning.
Right. I didn't even know the word existed.
So I mean, what happened then? I mean, do you jump online and Google
then I looked it up. It started.
Or?
I think it started in England, and it moved this, and that started to death cafes, and that started probably 15, 20 years ago, and now that's going heavy here in the United States.
What's a death cafe?
Just to have a safe space for people to sit around and talk about, and it's not just death; it's just as much about life and living, more fully, more richly. And it's not a and it's void of religion, so to speak, or any agenda there. It's mostly talking about some people's fears and desires and wishes and the mechanics of that. And also, like, are they fully prepared, not just practically with wills and such, but also have they had conversations with their family about, for example, if they want to be put on a respirator, or those clear wishes defined? Like, I want to make sure my kids know very clearly, have this conversation with them about, what my wishes are for a funeral and for what if I am, I am terminally ill and I need them to know these are the routes that I want to take. So that's what I was talking about as far as conversations go. I just think that these death cafes are planting seeds for people to have these conversations and for them to be more normalized in our culture to start talking about that.
And you said earlier that these have now been taking place at Givens.
Right. Yeah, starting about 5 months ago.
Open to anyone?
Right now, right now we started with about 12, and it's and I'm probably going to open up to more people. Would like to kind of keep it at a number of around 12 to 15, and so some leave because they're moving, and so we invite others in. But yeah, I think it's been good.
How, if someone's interested, what do they do?
I guess contact me and all. Yeah.
But
yeah. We have three more. We have 3 new ones coming. Probably the next. And
if there's more interest, you just start more groups, or?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that as I have more time.
Okay, so you do a little research. You figure out what a death doula is. The fact that hospice is just fairly recently come to the to the Lynchburg and the Virginia area. It's an opportunity for people to, die at home, right? Or in some cases, and, be in a place where they're comfortable around people that love them. So what's your next step? Are you picking up the phone and calling somebody and say, how can I help? Are you getting a certified? What's next?
Yeah. Well, I just recently, certified about 2 months ago. It took about a year. Actually, it took me a couple of years. There's just a lot of volunteer work and a lot of paperwork. So I've been volunteering for hospice. So I think I'm just kind of entering into now officially as more with that label as a death doula. But that would be, and it's for me, it's going to be all volunteer. Some doulas are paid, but
do people make careers out of this?
They do, actually.
They do, okay.
Yeah. If you look them up, there's been books written, and beautiful story of a woman, a doctor. She was a lawyer, very dissatisfied, took a trip to Cuba, sat next to a woman on a bus in Cuba I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. And the woman was dying, and she was kind of on her bucket list of traveling around Cuba and other countries. And I think literally just had maybe 6 months left and just completely flipped her brain. And this woman went from being a lawyer to a death doula. She's written a book, actually. I have a neat quote I'd love to share, by the way.
Yeah.
If that's possible. So physical death is only one form of dying. There are other forms of dying. We die whenever fear governs our choices.
Okay.
We die when we sacrifice growth for security. And we die whenever we choose a convenient certainty over an inconvenient mystery. That's a whole other topic we could get into about.
Those feel like those could be, for lack of a better term, temporary deaths.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But something dies in the process if you let fear kind of shove out the opportunity to learn something new.
But then you can overcome that fear.
Yeah. I'd love that idea that
and you're kind of reborn?
There could be growth, but instead you choose security, you know what I mean? Or a neat, tidy, certain idea instead of letting that idea die and letting some new idea replace it. I just think that's as James Hollis, he's a Jungian analyst. And the last one is from a guy who has sat with many, 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 many patients, by the way, Ostaseski. He wrote The 5 Invitations. We cannot be truly alive without maintaining an awareness of death. Death is not waiting for us at the end of a long road. Death is always with us in the marrow of every passing moment. She is the secret teacher hiding in plain sight. She helps us to discover what matters most. And the good news is we don't have to wait until the end of our lives to realize the wisdom that death has to offer.
So death's a woman.
Yeah, often things, that's like with ships and cars, right. They're always she's, Yeah, but I think of that often, that how often fear, that's the predominant emotion, fear, if you think about it. That's at the root of anger oftentimes, it's at the root of a lot of arguments between partners.
But that's also very instinctual, right? That's not something that we can ultimately control all the time.
I think that's survival fear. But the other type of fear, I think, perhaps, if I interpret this right, it's just a fear of vulnerability, a fear of owning a mistake, a fear of opening up and acknowledging one of your weaknesses. And, really good author on that is Alain de Botton. He talks about that is, I don't know, this gets into a whole other topic, but he talks about fear quite a bit. But that if two people were really honest and vulnerable, they'd get together, and some of the first questions that share and talk about, hey, this is what's crazy about me, what's crazy about you, instead of always trying to project our strengths and our, because we always want to come across as being on top of things and in charge and smart and,
It sounds like a lot of what you're talking about, like philosophically, and what you're kind of learning is, that people should, take chances, enjoy life, do what makes them happy, have good relationships, right? Not get bogged down with the things that so many, and that might be totally oversimplifying it, but don't get bogged down with the things in life that tend to bog us all down. Brush past that and enjoy it, because you don't know how long it's going to last.
Yeah.
And, you want to make sure that your relationships are good and, the regrets, right, that you talked about.
Yeah.
I mean, all of those kind of seem to, kind of stem from that same thing of where you really want to just not get bogged down with the things that bog you down in life.
Well, and you just mentioned 3 regrets. I mean, that would be it. Of having this adventuresome spirit and not letting small things, don't sweat the small things.
Right.
I never, should never say never, but I rarely trust anyone that says I don't have any regrets. For me, that's a conversation stopper. I'm gonna move on.
I think that's impossible.
Absolutely.
I think that's if you look back through your whole life. I should have gone to that college instead of that college. I should have bought that house instead of that house, or taken that job. Right? There's along the way, because we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
Right? No one goes through.
But
life
I've heard that a few times.
That I have no regrets.
Yeah. I don't have any regrets. But.
And then you're just like, yeah, right, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Be truthful with yourself. You've got to have some.
Yeah, for sure.
Because like we were just saying, I mean, people make mistakes. And if you don't regret some of the mistakes you made, which you learn from later on. Yeah. So this Death Doula thing, where do you go from here with it?
Well, once I have more time too, which I hope to, right? Because as I transition,
you're kind of stepping back from the bookstore a little bit.
I'll be there for probably some time, but as my daughter comes in, I'll be But
the plan is for her to kind of take over and you to step back eventually.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah. I'll still be involved in the process there, and it'll still be a cool hangout place for me. But and then I think this will probably take more front seat a little bit more, where I can emphasize it and I can, do some work there. But Rich, I think, honest to goodness though, I think so much of it starts with just tackling hard conversations, in so much of our lives, whether it's business, for me, I think the idea of inviting being wrong, I wish I had learned that 25 years ago. Hey, it was, what's his name? Hold on. Daniel Kahneman, who died a couple of years ago, economist. He would get in front of an audience and say, just prove me wrong. I love the feeling of being wrong. And think about that. I mean, what an attitude to have, imagine if you had that with your partner too. And not like prove me wrong, you know what I mean? But no, if I'm wrong, please tell me. I want to know, you know what I mean?
Looking at it as a growth opportunity.
Yeah, shrinking the ego. Yeah, and tackle a lot of conversations like that. Really hard conversations that so many of us avoid. The myriad of topics.
And we probably see that a lot in business, right? Where people know everything and they want to be in charge of everything rather than saying, hey, look, that's not my area of expertise. I've got so-and-so to handle this or so-and-so to handle that.
Yeah. Just shrinking the ego and teamwork and work, with humility instead of, authoritarianism. And then,
The future for Danny Givens is your daughter transitioning into more of a leadership role at the bookstore.
Yep.
You being able to step back a little bit, slowly but surely, and devote more of your time to volunteering as a death doula and helping people get through that final phase of life.
And more grandkid time.
More grandkids.
No, for sure. Yeah.
How many do you have?
8.
Wow.
And 3 kids in Salt Lake.
How does that not take up all your time?
Yeah. No, I've got 2 here in town. And luckily my oldest son flies for Delta, so I get to fly out there for free to visit them. But yeah, and then stay healthy for him. That's important for me. I'm just going to try and stay healthy for him. Yeah, that's the plan. I'm loving the opportunity to work with my daughter. That's going to be a joy. Yeah.
How long have you guys been working together so far?
Very little, because she's got another job, but but we've been obviously in the process for about 6 months now. But yeah, amazing daughter too. She's gonna do a great job. She loves to read, and she's organized and has just immense amounts of energy. Yeah, she's a firecracker. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting, and that'll give you an opportunity to spend more time doing what your new passion is.
Yeah. Just meet with friends and read more for sure. Yeah, things like that.
Danny, thank you for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Hopefully it was worthwhile.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, congratulations, 50 years on the bookstore. Yeah. And I know what you said about success, but Congratulations on that. And man, your new role as a death doula, helping people in the final stages of life. That's admirable.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the interview.
Danny Givens joining me on No Holds Barred.